are back. Welcome back, and this is episode 11 of KSP 101. We are picking back up where we left off. We have our probe here in polar orbit around to make its landing. We are aiming to land on the northern pole here at Duna, and then after we do that, we will begin constructing the unmanned station that we are going to put in an equatorial orbit around Duna. But for now, let's go ahead and begin landing this probe. Now, where we last left off, we left this probe in a 100 by 100,000 meter orbit around Duna after deploying the relay in a polar orbit. So, in order to land this, let's our periapsis, and by the time we get there, our polar relay should be right above us, so we should have plenty of connectivity the entire time that we are going to be landing this probe. We want to make sure that we are locked onto retrograde, and for now we'll keep it in the orbit mode on our navball, but we will be swapping that over to land mode, or surface mode, sorry, at some point during all of this. Now that we are at the periapse, let's begin our retro burn until we see the periapse start to dip down into the atmosphere at about, well, we're actually going to take it down to where it touches the surface. Say by then, the halfway point will be at about 50,000 right above the pole, I would say, maybe a little lower, which is idealistically where we want it to be, but we want to make sure not to land on the dark side of the pole, which through here we have the chance of doing that. I want to try to land it as close to the pole as possible because there's a very unique little surface feature there at the pole, but we'll see what happens. So for now we have our orbit decreased to where we are actually going to start to dip into the atmosphere and land on Duna. Let's go ahead and close some of these solar panels ahead of time because we don't want to have those open as we land. We'll keep the one that's pointing towards the northern tip open while closing the others. And before we close these other communitrons, let's save, just in case we lose connectivity with this relay, but I seriously doubt that we will. So let's retract this bottom one and see what happens. Okay, we're not losing any signal. And we want to keep at least one of these open. So let's close 3 of these other ones. We'll try to keep the northernmost one open. Honestly, I think that would be the best one to keep open. So let's highlight those. Let's deselect this one. That's the one we're going to keep open, and we'll select this one. And we will retract all 3 of those and hopefully not lose signal with our relay. I mean, honestly, I think we can close all of them and still keep signal, but let's also reorient our vessel to where those are both pointing a little more north evenly, say about there, and we'll lock our retro again. Let's go ahead and quick save one more time, and we still have plenty of delta V in this wolfhound stage. Once we get close to the atmosphere, which will be around 40,000 to 50,000 meters above the planet's surface, around that time we're going to eject this and prepare to use the Terra to land ourselves. Make sure our staging is good. Very good. Let's go ahead and quick save one more time just to be safe, and then we will time warp ahead to about 50,000 meters. At that point we are going to close our other solar panel because we still have the onboard solar panels that you don't have to deploy to provide plenty of solar power in the meantime. Okay, now that we are at the 50,000 meter mark, it is automatically cutting our time warp. Let's go on ahead and close that and our other larger communitron DTSM1. We'll check our connectivity. Still good. We're going to keep this one open. It's going to be expendable. We'll still have the 3 other ones. That's okay. Now let's exit our warp mode and switch to surface on our navball. Make sure we're locked to retrograde, and activate our wolfhound so we can slow down a decent bit. Looks like we overshot our warp, so I'm gonna disengage the retro, but stay locked onto it. And since we have so much delta V, I'm gonna let this keep burning to the point to where it's gonna slow down and then pick speed back up. And this is gonna swap around, and we're gonna actually start heading back the other way and try to land ourselves there where that surface feature is that I've been talking about or mentioning. And here it's going to start to increase again. And we're going to let it go to where it's just past that, between our probe and that little spot right there at the northernmost tip of Duna. And once that little surface feature is between us and our landing trajectory right about here, I'm going to cut the engine and need to make sure that we are lined up. We may have to rotate a little bit here. We're losing altitude fairly quickly, so we need to be a little quick about this. Let's point towards 270 and burn until that's right over top of that surface feature, then point back to retrograde. Okay, so we're dipping down into the atmosphere, but we haven't begun burning just yet into the atmosphere, where it's such a low atmospheric pressure and density. Let's make sure that that antenna is pointing northward. And now we wait until we are close to being on top of that, and then we will retro burn. Actually, let's go ahead and retro burn, trying to make sure that that landing trajectory is extended to where that surface point is always halfway between us and where we're going to land. But the closer we get to being right over top of it, you can actually probably see what I'm talking about now. It's right there, and we're going to try to land right there. So let's go ahead and slow down a little more. And then we'll cut our engine again. We're still moving down at a pretty decent pace. We're not going to land right on top of it. We're going to land right next to it from the looks of it, but that's okay. Let's go ahead and time warp until we're just a little above it. And once we're at about that point, we will begin to retro burn a little bit more right now. Try to bring that down to where we are right on our apoapsis. Then we will cut it off right about there. Now we should be good to land. Now we are definitely in the atmosphere because you can see some of that exhaust going on there whenever we throttle up. But let's go ahead and time warp down just a little bit more. And here shortly we're going to eject that wolfhound stage and prep the Terrier. See, our surface speed is increasing. Once it gets above 250, we're going to cut our time warp and try to slow that down to about 50 meters per second. So right about now, let's cut the engine on, drop it down to about 50 meters per second. And then we are out of our wolfhound fuel for that stage. So let's cut that stage, make sure our throttle is down. Let's go ahead and also activate our drogue ships. Like I said, a few to be able to use them effectively on Duna because there's not much of an atmosphere. Let's move our vessel around a little bit so we don't land directly on top of that. Let's try to push it towards the 135 mark, or no, let's push it towards the 315 mark. And now we just basically float on down to the surface. Let's go ahead and extend our landing gear. Let's look down there, make sure there's no debris. Looks like all of that wolfhound stage exploded, which is good. there's the surface feature I was talking about, and why we didn't want to land directly on top of it. At the northernmost tip, you have this nice, sharp, angular mountain, and there's some little mountain features leading to it. Now, about now, we should go ahead and activate our larger radial parachutes. Those will open up all the way. That puts us at a surface speed of about 11 meters per second, 10.5, a little lower. Let's deactivate our SAS, let it do its thing. Okay, it's on a roll. That's not good. Let's reactivate our SAS and lock onto retrograde, see if it'll move itself back around. Okay, that's not good. Let's activate our Terra engine a little bit here, see if we can't reorient our vessel back to retrograde. Looks like it's not going to let us, but we are going to miss that mountainside now. That's good. Come in for a smoother landing right about here. That'll be okay. Only bad thing is we're not pointing retrograde now, but I think we'll be okay since we have this one adapter part. We just need to make sure that we're going to land on that. Made us want to go ahead and lock prograde and pretend it's retrograde. I think it'll be okay. As long as the surface that we're landing on is a little smooth, which looks like it might be at an angle, a bit of an angle, but all in all, I think this will be okay. We can deactivate our landing gear. Once we land, we might try to roll it around. Kinda hurts where we don't have a reaction wheel, but and now we can't use the engine to slow ourselves down either. Okay, looks like we're okay. And we can't use our SAS to roll or anything. We can try to activate our landing gear to see if we can do anything with that, but it's not looking like it's gonna do anything. If we use our engine, all we can do is prop ourselves upright, maybe. Let's go full throttle, see what happens. Try to roll anything that we can do to try to reorient ourselves without damaging the probe. Let's deactivate the SAS, try to roll a little bit, maybe. Yeah, it's not going to let us reorient the vessel at all, is it? Oh, that's okay. We landed, that's all that matters, right? Let's reactivate our SAS so we stop moving. Maybe do a little time warp and then cancel it and see what happens. Alright, let's just activate our SAS. So, this solar panel, actually I really want to do a better landing, so let's reload that quick save. And this time we'll make sure to not disengage the SAS after we activate the parachute so it doesn't flip the probe and we can land properly. This is going to cut into our 1 hour duration a little bit, but it'll be okay. We'll still have enough time to build that station and send it to Duna in orbit. Looks like we are still in line to land where we want to. Let's go ahead and warp ahead a little bit. Make sure that we are locked on the prograde. Switch to surface. Once it reorients itself, this time we don't have to do what we did last time, which is re-extend our orbit by burning all that extra fuel. Let's go ahead and reduce that to where that surface feature is halfway between us and where we're supposed to land, like last time. That should be good. And we'll time warp ahead a little bit more until we start to touch the atmosphere, all the while keeping an eye out for that. We're almost on top of it. Let's go ahead and retro burn a little bit more. For about maybe 5 more seconds. Should actually be able to see some of that atmospheric effect from the engine. Well, probably not until we're down closer to 30,000 or so. Alright, that should be okay. Alright, now let's go back to this view and time warp ahead a little bit. Make sure to close this solar panel and this other communotron so we don't lose it due to atmospheric forces. There we go. Okay. I need to keep this open so we can keep an eye on our electrical charge while we're doing this as well. We're getting fairly close to the surface now. Once we're right on top of that, we will begin to retro burn again until we use up all the fuel. Okay. Let's let that lock back on prograde and then we'll cancel our time warp here. I honestly want to go a little closer to that, so let's reorient the vessel towards the 315 mark and lock and burn just a little bit. There we go. Now let's move it up a little bit so we can move that over to be a little closer to the surface feature that we're trying to get to. Okay, so we need to go down to about the north mark and burn there. And then we will point back to retro. And after it's fully locked onto retro for the most accuracy, slowly burn that until we're close to the mountainside. Alright, then we'll cut it off. Let's time warp down till we're about maybe 15,000 meters from the surface, and we'll slow ourselves back down to 50 meters per second. And 3, 2, 1, 0, and cut the time warp and reduce our speed back down to 50 meters per second. And then we'll time warp a little more. Actually, let's cut the time warp while we're on our way down. It would be a good idea to collect some science while we're floating in the atmosphere here. First, like this, reduce our speed while we're doing this a little bit. Once it hits 50, cut it off, aim our camera up here. Let's try to grab some science before we land now that we're floating down in the lower atmosphere. Let's log this pressure, and instead of transmitting, we'll keep it for now. Grab the thermometer reading and one of the mystery goos. Let's bring that back down to 50 again real quick. Cut it off. Observe this mystery goo. We'll keep that experiment. Hey, there's a nice shot of Ike over there past the horizon. Very nice. Let's try to get a good view of that real quick. Yeah, that looks nice. Try to get the whole vessel in it too. That'll make a nice shot. Alright, now let's slow ourselves back down to 50 again. Let's cut that off. It's about time to eject this wolfhound, but we'll use it as much as possible. We'll do it one more time, going ahead and slow it down to maybe 25 meters per second. And then we'll be at a stable descent speed to be able to push this sideways and eject it. Let that point back to retrograde and then activate our chutes, activate our landing gear, activate our main chutes. There it goes. Hopefully it will still explode once it hits the surface. Let's try to activate our Terrier so we can try to stay locked on to our retrograde as much as possible so we don't flip around again like last time. I really don't want to do that. Oh, it's still going to do it, isn't it? It's because of the placement of the parachutes. Could have done better, but it is okay. We'll just land it like we did last time since we have to take what we can get. In fact, since we do have plenty of fuel in that Terrier, let's go ahead and cut some of these larger parachutes so we can reorient ourselves. Say we cut that one, so let's cut the one on the opposite side very quickly before we lose the chance to do this. Cut this one. Now we should be able to lock closer to retrograde. Let's just cut this last one though. Quickly now, quickly. Alright, now we should be able to point retrograde. And we will use our Terrier engine to reduce our speed for the landing as quickly as possible. Alright, let's cut the engine and then stabilize it. Ugh, that's rough. Let's activate our brakes and lock our SAS. And try to control this as much as possible. We can maybe even try to do a little bit of a roll. Activate our engine. Nope. Okay, let's just cut the engine and take what we have. And try to roll it to where we can reduce that as much as possible. Once we lose that speed, let's deactivate our SAS. Okay, now we're nice and stable and stopped. We'll take what we can get. It's not a perfect landing thanks to the way that we put those parachutes on there, but that's okay. Let's extend this solar panel, then let's extend this antenna. We should have an antenna safe to extend over here somewhere. Yeah, okay. We'll extend that, and then we'll set this to allow partial, and then transmit the data that we got from the atmosphere on the way down. And once we have all that transmitted, then we will begin to get the rest of our science. Observe this mystery goo. Transmit. And then let's transmit this barometric reading science. Transmit some seismic data, which will take a little more energy and time to transmit. We should still have plenty of electrical charge to also transmit this temperature reading from the pole. And that's all the science we can get there. And that electrical charge should be increasing. Looks like it's decreasing. Not sure. We'll find out here in a moment. Let's time warp a little bit. Yeah, it keeps decreasing. Not sure why. Blocked by terrain. Oh, okay, there's just not enough direct sunlight then. Yeah, the sun's going down over there. Oh, we got everything we needed from the probe, so let's save our progress. We'll just leave this thing dead on the surface. I mean, it'll still charge and reconnect to the relay that we have in orbit, but otherwise this thing is entirely useless now. It has completed its mission. Let's go ahead and head back to the Space Center now. Now it's time to build the unmanned station that we're going to be putting in orbit of Duna. We're going to be putting it in orbit close to about 75,000 meters to 100,000 meters, somewhere in between those. For the vessel that we're going to be sending to Duna to land, we're going to send it to an orbit for it to dock up with that station to refuel, and then land on the surface of Duna, and then come back up to that station, redock and refuel, and then return back to Kerbin. And we did get a little bit of science. Let's see if there's anything we can use it on. So that requires 300. Would be useful to get that new probe core, but not sure there's much else science we can do real quick to get that, so we'll just work with what we have. Let's do a quick save to save our progress. Then we will head to the VAB to begin working on the station. Now, primarily this station is just for making sure that there's extra fuel that we can transfer to the landing vessel for the landing and the return, but we're also going to make it a bit of a relay booster, so it's also going to double over as a secondary relay. But for now, let's start with our hex core, and we'll set it to heaviest part. Let's go ahead and name this too. I like to name mine KSS for Kerbal Space Station, and then we'll name it the KSS-1. Okay, and then let's put our docking port on this, but we may have to first put a structural part, the FLA5 adapter, on top of that, and then put the Communitron or Clampatron docking port on top of that. There we go, that way it fits better. And then we will put some lights. Actually, let's take that, move it up a little bit, go to our structural parts, and then take the T12 structural tube at the smallest size, place it here. Let's reattach this and detach this, put this here, and then put that there. There we go. Let's make sure that is set to grandparent part as well. Let's make sure all of them are, this is heaviest, good. Now we will go down here and by putting first some lights pointing upward, then you can hold both shoulder buttons and use the D-pad to reorient it to where it's pointing inward. Set it to radial 2, and then move those into that structural part just a little bit, and then move it up, not too far though, so it's not blocking the port here. Let's move it down just a little bit, there we go. And since we're going to Duna, I'm going to set the light to be a bit red, reddish orange. We can turn it on to get a look at it. There we go. And then I'm going to add a little green to make it kind of a brick color. There we go. Alright, and then I'm going to take those lights and then make sure to go back to the place tool. I'm going to hold square or X on the Xbox and hit X or A on the Xbox to copy those and reorient those like I did the other ones to where they're kind of pointing down but outward like that. That way we have some light pointing down on the station as well. Move those inward like so. Now we've got some lighting. Let's go ahead and turn those off. And then we want to make sure we have everything else we need for this part of the station, which will include, let's see. For now, let's put some RCS thrusters on here. We're going to set that to radial 4 to be in between all these lights at about the center of mass for this section, which will be about here. Set those to radial 4, about there. Okay, so that changed our center of mass. Let's move them up a little bit. There we go. And then we need to put some RCS tanks in, but we won't put those there. For now, we'll just leave it that way. Let's go back to our structural parts and grab an FL-A5 adapter again and place it here at radial 1. And then we'll strut that up by finding the center point and then setting it to radial 8. Just like we did on the relay probe, find the center spot and strut those up. And then we will go back to, actually no more structural tubing. From now on we're going to start using fuel, but we need a place for our kerbals to transfer into this just in case. Let's go down to our utility parts and grab the Mark I crew cabin. That'll be good. Less mass, more practical. Set that to grandparent part. And then let's grab, let's go ahead and put a docking port at the bottom of that. And then we'll also need to make sure to put some RCS thrusters to where it'll match up with the other RCS thrusters relative to the center of mass, so that'll be about here. We'll move those over 1, 2, 3, set those to radial 4, looking good. And this is where we're going to take some monopropellant tanks. Let's grab these. Actually, no, let's grab these larger ones. And we're only going to need about 100, and these have 50 each, so we'll radial to it. And then auto strut those to grandparent part and move those into that as well as possible to where they're not poking out. There we go. Not poking out at all, not interfering with anything, looking good. Now we need to go back to our utility parts. Actually, instead of doing that, we can just copy these again. Make sure we're on place. Copy those. And then we will put those about here, radial 2. We just need to make sure they're pointing inward more so we can have more lighting on that docking port, like so. Let's go to our move tool, move those inward. Try not to block the window if we can help it or so. There we go. Let's turn those on and see what that's going to look like. Got some lighting on the docking port. Very good. Let's turn it back off. Okay, looks like that's all we're going to need for that. Now it's going to say that the hatch is obstructed, but if you have the vessel docked to it, you can still transfer into it and transfer out to another vessel and leave the station if you want to EVA that way, so it'll be okay. Don't need any of this cargo. Don't need any of this science. We do need to attach some relays to this. Let's grab these new larger ones and place them on the outsides away from the windows here. That looks good. We'll just move them in a little bit from there. Make sure to set those to grandparent port, and we'll move those in like so until it looks like that. Then we'll just move it back out a little bit. Looking good. Now we just need to take care of the power, so let's go up to that. Let's grab these Z400s, we'll set them here, radial 2, and then move those into that like so. And then we will grab some of these photovoltaic panels. We'll put 2 here, and we'll grab some more to put about another good hard point to put those. Let's see, find the center here, and then move 1, 2. We'll do radial 2 there, moving back over here. 1, 2, we'll do radial 2 here. And then let's also connect some of these 1x6s here. Auto strut those to grandparent part. That takes care of our power needs. Don't think there's anything else that we need to add to the station outside of maybe one of these advanced inline stabilizers. So let's place that. Let's grab this and then place it here. And then we'll take this, move it here, and we'll go to our move tool. We'll move the lights down to about there. That looks good. Maybe one more spot back up and then inward once. Should still be enough lighting. Then we just need to grab these RCS thrusters and make sure that we can get them more relative to the other RCS thrusters in that center of mass. That looks good. Might need to move these down just a hair, so we'll just move those down to about there. That looks a little bit more even. Let's save our progress. Very good. Okay. I am worried about our connectivity with just 2 of those relay dishes. Let's go back down to our communication section and grab some of these Communitron DTSM1s. Find somewhere to put these. Might be blocking the window a little bit, but that's okay. We'll just put those there at radial 2. Let's auto strut those to grandparent and extend them. See what they're going to look like. Looking good. These solar panels should not get in the way either. Very good. Let's retract all that. Alright, so there's our station core. Now we just need to take another docking port, put it here, set that to grandparent part, and this is where we're going to add the fuel stage, which will largely be for refueling the vessels. It's already at 3.5 tons. We're just going to go ahead and set it up to be using the larger fuel tanks than the typical smaller. What size is that? The TD12 or gosh, I'm not thinking straight at all here. The can't see the size of those. Should tell us somewhere though, right? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Yes, the 1.25 meter diameter, or radius, whichever, the fuel tank size, the small ones like this. Instead of using those, we're gonna move on to the larger ones. We're gonna have the largest available option for that, which is the FLTX 1800. We're gonna place it on there. Actually, no, let's go bigger. Let's go on ahead and go back up here to our adapters and grab this A215 and place it there. auto strut that to grandparent part, and then we will just grab one of the Rocco Maxes down here, the X232, and place it here. Auto strut at the grandparent part, and we will stick a Wolfhound on it. Since we still have a little bit more mass to play with, a little more room to increase our mass, let's remove that, go back to our fuel tanks. Let's add the X216. See how much mass that adds onto it once we reconnect that. Okay, that's a little too much, so we'll remove that and get the smaller one. And add it there, and then place this back on. Now again, you would want it to be at least 35 tons or less for a Wolfhound, but where we're primarily using this as a refueling stage, it'll be okay, because we're not going to use that Wolfhound a whole lot. Now, we are going to need to put a fairing around this, and we're going to put that right here. So let's go to our fairing, get that 2.5 meter fairing, place it here, extend it out to where it's going to push a little beyond the relay dishes, and then we will close up the fairing after we build it up here. Say about there should be fine, then we'll close it up. Very good. Okay, now let's auto strut that to grandparent part, set it to clamshell with a ejection force of about 500 or so, and I like to use two sides. Now that's good. Let's put this back on here. Okay, so there's our pretty much our station. Now let's grab the hex core, set to radio 1, move it up a good bit, and after we move it up as far as we can get it, we will go back down, check our staging, make sure the fairing is deployed a little early. Let's set a TD25 decoupler down below that Wolfhound and begin to build a rocket that is going to take this to Duna. Let's go ahead and grab a reaction wheel to stick under there, set it to heaviest. This will be for our skipper stage. Let's see how much weight the Jumbo 64 will add to it. Way too much. Let's go a step down, see how much that's going to add to it. 55.8 tons, that should be okay. Set that to grandparent part, and let's stick the skipper on and see where that puts us. 58. We can probably add a little bit more fuel, to be honest, because this is going to be our transfer and hopefully orbital stage. So let's grab the smallest Rocco Max that we can find, put it on there, and then reattach that and see where it puts us. 6.3. Okay, that's as far as I'm gonna be willing to take that. So make sure this decoupler is set with the Wolfhound. Go back to the decoupler, put another TD25 under the skipper, grandparent part, and let's grab two of these larger reaction wheels and place them, put the top one to root, bottom one to heaviest. Let's grab the jumbo fuel tank and place it under there, and then we will bottom that off with a larger one, or I mean a smaller one than the smallest. Strut those to grandparent part, make sure that jumbo is as well, and we will place the mainsail on that, set it to root part. Let's zoom out and take a look at this. Now, unlike the last one, I am going to asparagus stage this to try to maximize fuel efficiency, so let's grab these TT70s, set those at about the halfway point here, set it to radial 2, grab another, move it to the opposite side, set those there, then we're going to auto strut those to grandparent part. And then we're basically going to use the same stage that we have in a central stage. So let's go to our jumbo and try to place it as close to the tippy top of that as we can. and then rotate over and do the same thing onto that decoupler. Looks like it's off a little bit. Let's move it over one more. Okay. Those look nice and even, so let's strut those to grandparent part. And we can actually just copy this onto these. And then we do need to check the weight of those just to see how much more we can push. So that's 36 tons. That brings us up to 45 tons. And then that brings us to 49.5 tons. We can actually add another jumbo on top. So let's do that. It's going to make this a little bit expensive. It's not entirely necessary, but we are going to be moving this station to orbit around Ike once we complete the landing and return, so we can do the same thing at Ike. So the more fuel we have to use for both of those missions, the better. But for now, let's grab that and move it down to where the decoupler is at about the halfway point, like that. Do the same thing to the other one. Make sure they're nice and even. Looks good. Okay. So now we need to top that off with a couple reaction wheels, like so. Do the same thing to the other side. Make sure to auto strut those. Root at the top. Hey now, cooperate. There we go. And then heaviest at the bottom. The more control, the better, I say. Doesn't hurt. And let's put some cones on those. Now that we have these larger cones, I'm going to make them the orange ones and set those to grandparent port. I'm going to make these tanks orange since they are outer stages. They'll look a little prettier. All about those aesthetics. You know what, I'll keep the bottom ones like that though. Looks pretty cool, I think. Comes down to preference though. Do what you want. There we go. Let's copy these nose cones and set those here. I'm going to save our progress. Let's check our staging. Now, last time we did not stage these properly. We need to make sure these two side stages go first. Then we can rotate and get rid of these. So let's make sure, let's move all of those engines down here. All the main engines that we're going to be using. I don't know why it separated those just now, but oh well. There we go. Now we need to separate the decouplers here from those and then move this central engine down to about here. Now we just need to figure out where our decouplers are. Now, as I mentioned, we are going to be trying to decouple these first. So see, that one's there, that one's there. Okay, so our stages are set up proper. Just need to make sure that that's with that now. Very good. Now we just need to asparagus this with some fuel tanks. Fuel lines, sorry. Let's grab the fuel lines. These are going first, so we need to connect these to these tanks. And then those are going next. So we will take some more fuel lines. Let's do this so we can get rid of that info panel. We'll just place it wherever. Click the stick in a few times so we can get rid of that, and then let's move it in 1, 2, 3 spaces and connect those to the central stage. So now we have our fuel lines set properly. We just need to strut this thing up. Let's go to our struts. Okay, first things first, I like to start at the top. Let's go to the tippy top of our nose cones here. Actually, no. Let's make it easier on ourselves by going up here. And then setting it to radial 4. Because if we did it on the nose cones, we would have to do 2 at a time, and it wouldn't be as symmetrical. So we'll just do it here. Try to find the tippy top and center of those, and we'll place those there. Looking good. Now we'll just move it down to about where the engine connects to it. We'll place radial 4 there. Go down, We'll find the center point of the nose cones, like so. We'll place those there. And then we have one more to attach to the area around the nose cones, which will be as close to where the nose cones touch the fuel tanks as possible. So about here. And let's try to get a good angle to find where we're going to connect these, even if we have to do this to try to find out where that's going to be. And that's not going to cooperate. We'll take it from the top then. Try to rotate that just a little bit to where we can see the nose cone. There we go. Alright, so let's place those. Might have to place it at the tippy top of the reaction wheel, because if you do it to the bottom of the nose cone, it moves over at an angle like that. It would be a little better just to attach it to the reaction wheel like so. But that was set to radial 2. Not good. Let's go back, grab that, set it to radial 4, and then go back to where we can see in like that, and do that again. There we go. Now we're looking good. So that's all the struts we need up there. Now we just need to focus on strutting the central stage to the other fuel tanks, set it to radial 4, zoom in a little bit. This is a lot easier because it has those two ribbed portions of the fuel tank. We'll just place those about there. So now we have our top struts. Let's try to put some closer to the center, like so. Radial 4. Find a good angle to do this. Once that starts to shift over to the other side, we'll know if we're close to the center, we'll put them there. And then we will move down to about here. Radial 4 one more time. Try to zoom in and find where the center of that is, but try to also make sure that those are nice and straight across. Don't want them at too much of an angle. And once those shift over a little bit, we will know we are at the center. We'll put them there. Very close, very good. Now we just need to strut these together, these outer stages. Let's find the center close to the bottom here, and then we will place those on the same spot on this outer tank. Then move over to the other side, do the same thing here. And I think we're not going to be able to strut these from the interior over to the other side like we have in the past, but we'll take a look. Not very successfully, so we just won't do that this time. Let's move up a little bit to where all our other struts have been placed. We'll strut those into each other from there. Do the same thing to the other side, as close to the same spot as possible for symmetrical reasons. About there. Let's move up to our next strut section. It's pretty close, right? Okay. Let's put those in between that decoupler and that. Let's put that in line with the bottom of that silver part of that there. Whoops. Okay, we just need to place that wherever so we can fix that. We want that on top of that. There we go. Okay, and then we can just place it in the center on top of it there. Do the same thing to the other side. And we'll move up and find where we place the struts to the center on this one. Need to make sure that we are lined up to the center there. Okay, so it's going to be about here. We can just place that there. Do the same thing to the other side. It's just pretty much going to be the opposite. Find the center, which is where that line on the nose cone is. We'll move it down from there. You can kind of see that it's a little blurry on the tank, indicating that's where the center is. Try to make that as level as possible. Now that should be all the struts that we need. Looking good. Very good. Let's save our progress. Everything is staged correctly still, that's good. We can move our vessel down closer to the ground now. Let's grab our hex to highlight the entire vessel, move it down. Once it starts to poke into the ground, move it up just a hair above the ground. Then we will activate our overlays, the rest of them. We already have the center of mass on, so we're good on that. Let's go to our aerodynamics, grab these winglets, and try to place them in the central stage. We won't need any in the outer stage since these are much larger. We'll radial 4 those between the center of mass and center of thrust, and set those to grandparent part. And make sure no struts are interfering. Very good. And close to the center of mass, I am going to add one more set of struts, just for the sake of stability. I'm going to set one here, move it over one space, set it to radial 4, and set those between the central strut and the outer strut, so about there. And then I'm going to move over one space to the other side, make sure it's even, do the same thing on this side, kind of in between both of those again. And we just need to take a look around the vessel, make sure those are correct. Doesn't look like it, does it? Okay, we'll do it the hard way. We will find that center point on this one, set it to about there. Let's grab the other one that we placed, move it over here, find that central space, make sure we're placing it in the same spot. Try to make that as balanced and even as possible. And we're just going to do the same thing to the other ones, like so. Let's see, those were in line to where the middle of those was on that line, so we'll just place that there. Do the same thing to the other side. That should look good. Let's take a look. Very good. And aha, okay, so that one's way further out than it needs to be. Let's just move it in one space. Place it back over there. Now we're looking good. Okay. That's 491 tons. It can push 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 300, 600, 900, 1200. So it can push about 620 tons. Plenty of thrust to weight. Now we just need to grab these launch stabilizers, or stability enhancers, find the center of mass, and place them about there, then place another one, rotate over, place them there. Okay, so we have our launch stages and transfer stage and orbital stage for this new relay station, unmanned. Let's save it. And then check our staging again. Let's put these together. Take the central engine under those. Put those 4 outer engines above those. We are looking good. Let's save that craft. Make sure there are no Kerbals in this. And then let's just return to the Space Center for now so we can go to the tracking station and set up our launch window. We've only got about 17 minutes left to spare. Hopefully that'll be enough time for us to do the launch and get this thing out to Duna and put it in orbit. And that's where we're going to end this episode. And then in the next episode we will build the craft that we are going to use to land on Duna. I don't know why I went back into the VAB. Let's hurry up and get back into VAB, then get to the tracking station. But yeah, in the next episode we are going to build the vessel that we're going to be using to land on Duna and launch it out to orbit of Duna and maybe even land it in the next episode, but we'll see. But for now, let's focus on getting this thing out to Duna and put it in Duna orbit. Okay, we are heading back to the Space Center, then we will go to the tracking station, we will check for debris that we need to get rid of, and then time warp around to that perfect launch window. Should be loaded, there we go. Now let's move down to the tracking station. Let's get rid of this debris while we're at it. That one's still on its way out of Duna. We don't need that one that's landed at Duna. We'll keep the probe for now, just for the heck of it, because I like it. Alright, let's click our left stick and zoom out. And we can use the left or right shoulder buttons to focus on Kerbin. And then we will activate time warp at max warp. And now that we have a connection to Duna there, you can actually see what I've been talking about. Once we get past Kerbal there, once that line is at the tip of Kerbin's orbit, around here probably, somewhere around here, and it's starting to extend out beyond Kerbin's orbit line, that's where we're going to want to stop. And it'll be the perfect spot to transfer to Duna, which you will see here shortly, maybe in about 10-15 seconds. Be a nice visual depiction of what we've been trying to do for our transfer window. Like, once you have a communication network set up everywhere for the entirety of the Kerbal system, you'll be able to pinpoint the perfect launch window for the transfer opportunities, because you'll be able to see these lines all over the place. Now, once that's flush with Kerbin's orbit, we will cut the warp. Go ahead and make sure it's going to do that this time. It messed up on us last time. Just keep zooming in to get more and more accuracy here. And we're watching that yellow line. Once it's right and flush like that, we will cut it. And we literally have a straight line to Duna right there. We could zoom in to make it a little more perfect. Let's see. We are going to do it just a hair there. Zoom back out to where we can see Duna. Let it get nice and dark red. And then zoom back in. Perfect. We're even at the center point of that portion of the orbit, so we are ready to go. Let's leave the tracking station, and we'll quick save real quick and then launch this vessel. Have 13 minutes left. I think we can do this. Once this loads up, let's quick save real quick. And then we will go to our launch pad. We will grab that KSS-1. Make sure no Kerbals are in those empty seats, and then hit X or A on the Xbox to launch. And we are on our way with one of the heaviest, most powerful, complex creations that we have made in the series so far. It's a very useful launch stage down there. You can actually separate it and then set the root part to the top of that launch stage and save the launch stage to attach to anything else that you want to launch with that launch stage. It's a very useful way of doing it. We might cover that in the series, but for now, let's focus on the mission. Let's wait till we're zeroed out nice and stable. SAS on. Let's go ahead and time warp until we can see some daylight here, so we can see what we're doing this time. Wait for that to stabilize again. SAS off. Let it stabilize. SAS on. Throttle up and launch. Good looking vessel there. Lots of thrustaways, so we might want to reduce that to about there until we get a little higher up in the atmosphere. Alright, we are on our way. Let's throttle up just a little bit more. Okay. I do want to make sure that those outer stages are the ones that are going to go first. Looking good. Okay, because if you zoom in and highlight that, you'll see those turn green. Alright, so now we need to begin our turn. Not that much. There we go. It's very smooth, very smooth. Once we hit about 250 meters per second at that 80 mark on that 90-degree inclination, we will lock our SAS and go full throttle. It's pretty close. Let's make sure that's at 90. There we go. Full throttle. Here shortly we will have to stage as soon as we stage, we'll start to move over again because we're increasing our speed pretty rapidly. Stage. It should fall without any consequences. Looking good. Okay, now let's go ahead and start moving over towards that 90-degree angle. Just a little ahead of our prograde mark. Looks like our rotation moved a little bit. Let's try to correct that. Once we hit that 90 mark, we'll lock our SES and begin to rotate for our second stage ejection, or decoupling. So we're already at that 500 meter per second mark. I'm just going to move it a little ahead, trying to maintain control of the vessel. Lock that 90-degree inclination on that 90-degree angle. And then we will rotate with the left trigger very smoothly, very slowly. And then we will lock ourselves, move ourselves back to that 90 mark at the 90-degree inclination. Try to make sure that our prograde top mark is in line with that as well as possible. That way when we eject those stages we'll be okay, but we do need to make sure our apoapsis isn't too far out yet. We checked it just in time. Once it's at 70, let's go down, point towards the horizon line. Let's rotate, lock our rotation, and then hit that 90-degree inclination and lock the horizon. And watch our apoapsis, make sure to watch our G-force. If that moves down before we hit 100,000 meters, it'll be time to stage. Which I think it might, or it might do it right at the same time, but we'll see. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, cut the engine. We have just a little bit of fuel left in those stages. Let's realign ourselves a little bit here. So we're right on top of that horizon mark. Let's lower it down to about -5 degrees. Make sure we're at the 90-degree inclination. And then we'll lock. Use the rest of that real quick and then we'll stage. And let's go on ahead and get rid of the fairing as well to lose a little bit more weight. Let's boost away from all this a little bit. And then we will extend our solar panels. Crew hatches non-existent and getting in the way somehow. Alright, we'll do those one at a time, I guess. And then we'll also extend our communitrons. Now that we're out of the atmosphere, we don't have to worry about the solar panels or communitrons getting damaged. Looks like we're going to have to aim our camera a little closer to those. We need to move a little quickly because we are swiftly approaching that 100,000 meter mark. Alright, let's try to get those highlighted individually. And then we will extend those. That should definitely be enough communication ability for this mission. If not, once we get close to Duna, it'll pick back up on the communication connection. Turn our lights on just for the heck of it. We're not losing electrical charge, we're okay. Looks like we have some achievements though. Okay, that's from landing on Duna. Should be the only one. Yep, okay, a little extra cash from that. Alright, let's lock prograde. We are close to our apoapsis, still a minute to go. We can zoom out and use that spare time to set our target lock on Duna. Once again, you can just select it anywhere on its line once you're far out enough. Set at the target. And then let's go ahead and time warp ahead to cut that down to about 10 seconds. Let it reorient to prograde. Slowly increase our throttle while it's doing that, and then once it hits it, go to full throttle. And let that circularize. It's going to take more than 10 seconds, but that's why we started at the 10-second mark, so we can burn for an additional 10 seconds out beyond our apoapsis. It's been burning for about 7, 8, 9, 10 seconds. So it's going to be a little off, but that's okay. We'll just let it circularize, wait for that periapsis to pop out. Once it does, we'll highlight it, keep an eye on it. Once those rotate, we will cut and warp over to the apoapsis. I think it'll be okay, Because Duna is where? It's over there. Okay, so it's not okay. We'll just take what we have then. Let's quick save. And then warp around to where we're going to be ready to burn towards Duna. Do a quick little time warp. But we want to make sure not to warp too far ahead because we have to realign before we can start our burn. Let's keep an eye on our resources too. So now that we're on the night side, we're losing power. Let's turn those lights off. Try to conserve as much as possible. Now we should have a good bit of time before it'll be time to warp to Duna. Looks like we have a direct connection to our relay over there too. That's good. Let's rotate our vessel. Reorient it to where those panels are north and south. Very good. And once we lock our prograde right on top, we will finish our time warp until the target marker is touching the prograde mark. Don't have too much time left to do this. Let's try to wrap this up. Once those start to touch and it moves into it, we will cancel the time warp, let it reorient itself. Once it's reoriented, we will begin our transfer burn. Have about half a fuel tank still. Won't be enough to leave the Kerbal system, but it will be enough to get us started. We will have to eject it about halfway. Alright, let's begin our burn. And once again, we're on the dark side. Sorry for the lack of visibility, but we are on our way. Let's keep an eye on that apoapsis. Should burn out before we even touch the Mun's orbit. Looks like the Mun won't be in our way. That's good. And once again, you can see we're like straight in line with Duna with our communication line there. Should be almost time to stage. Now, a few seconds here, it'll be time to stage. It's extending pretty quick. Might have enough still. Okay, there we go. As soon as we stage, we need to zoom out on that map. Let's go ahead and stage it and then throttle up. Get rid of that and then full throttle. Zoom out very quickly. There we go. Now let's keep an eye on that apoapsis. Let's put our focus on Duna. Once that gets nice and close to Duna's orbital line, we will slow down and bring ourselves in for a nice tight rendezvous. Getting there. Getting there. 20.9 is what we're looking for. Oh, alright, we have our mark. Let's move it in closer. Let's back it off once it hits about 1 million. And then slowly bring that in. And then cut it as soon as it hits below 100,000. Slowly bring that in. Okay. Now let's reduce the thrust limiter down to about 10 like last time. Let's zoom in on Duna, see what we're looking at. Pretty much just like last time. So we need to point normal. So let's move it over to the normal mark. And for that center dot about halfway over, we will let off the stick, let it slow down. Once it slows down enough, we will deactivate the SAS, let it move on over, and then lock the SAS right on top of the dot. And zoom in so we can get our alignment. Try to make sure that the Ike orbital line is nice and flush. Highlight the periaps. Move that down until it's nice and even with that. And there will come a point to where that will stop increasing and start decreasing, but there we go, nice and flush. Let's point back to prograde. And just like last time, we will be reducing this even further, as close to 1 or below as possible. Highlight our periapsis. We're going to try to bring that down as close to 100,000 as possible, because when we time warp a little bit, it is going to mess with it. We are still under the influence of Kerbin's gravity. Now that we're locked on Pro, let's bring it in. Zoom out a little bit, and then we will slow it down. bring it down as close to 100,000 as possible. Looks like we have a nice even insertion here. Let's cut it right there. And then we need to try to reduce this as close to 0 as possible now, if we can. 0.25, that's not bad. Let's quick save just in case anything happens though. Let's highlight our periapsis. Just nudge it on down until it hits close to 100,000. Alright, now let's quick save, and very quickly we will deactivate and enable time warp and skip it ahead just one little notch. Wow, okay. We will still take that because we can decrease it once we get to about this point. But for now, let's set our time warp ahead to 1 away from the top. It will automatically cut off once we leave Kerbin's sphere of influence right there. And it's still time warping ahead, so it won't affect us too much when we select this point on the orbit or trajectory line and warp there. Didn't affect it at all. Good. Now we wait. Just to give you a heads up of what this looks like, since we didn't last time, there's our transfer. It's just a little out beyond, so it's not an entirely perfect one where we warped ahead just a little bit probably, but it's okay. Our ascent node is fine. We'll just have to correct that a little bit once we get here. If we really wanted to though, zoom back out and show you. We've already passed the descent node, which would have been close to about like here or so, where we could have burned normal to bring it back down to 0 and had a better degree of inclination in our transfer. But honestly, if you look at it, we're coming in pretty evenly here. A nice even line there still. So it's not going to be too much of a hassle to correct that once we get there. We're already 2 minutes past where I was wanting to stop, but so far I'm not getting any indication that I need to cut the stream just yet, but I'm going to have to here shortly. So we're going to move through this pretty quickly once we get here. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight where I'm going to warp close to Ike to make sure we don't smash into it. And once it arrives over here, I'm going to set that time warp ahead just a little bit and then prepare to do that time warp. And then we're going to time warp to the periapsis and do our retro run. Actually, we need to go ahead and make sure that's set to retro, so when we arrive, while it's realigning to retro, we can set our throttle back to 100. Still have our connection, very good. Or looking good at least. And alright, now we are close to retro. Just waiting for that. As soon as it hits retro, we will begin to retro burn. It's not moving in fast enough. Let's go to radial N, which should be over here to the left on the 270 mark. Halfway there, we'll back off the stick and then deactivate the SAS. Move it down to the center, and then lock our SAS, try to keep it centered on that radial N, and be very careful when you do this, because it's going to move quickly, I presume. Just barely throttle up until that hits about 100,000, staying centered on radial N. Once it hits 100,000, here shortly we will cut the engine right there. And then we will set our time warp ahead just a little. Didn't affect it good. Let's time warp close to where Ike should be. Make sure we're not going to smash into it. Fairly close that time, a lot closer, but still safe. Let's let that reorient to retrograde. Once it's ready, we will time warp ahead just a little bit. And then see how that affects it. Didn't affect it at all, very good. Let's time warp to where we're right behind the periapsis. And once we get there, we will begin our orbital burn. Have tons of fuel left over for all these missions. And we should see it start to come into view right now. Very good. We barely have any connection. Need to make the most out of this while we can. It's warp ahead until we're about 20 seconds behind that periapsis. Hope we don't lose the connection. Okay, now we have a connection with that relay. Very good. Alright, now we will begin our burn at about 15 seconds away. We should have the stage here okay, we honestly should have enough to do our orbital burn in this stage, but we'll find out. Let's refocus on our vessel by hitting the 2 sticks in. Zoom back in. Okay, so there's 15 seconds of burn. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, now we're burning a little late still. We probably should have started burning at 25 seconds away or so, but that's okay. It will reduce our orbital line on this side as we continue to them, but we'll see that more here shortly. Just waiting for that to wrap around Duna now, here in just a few seconds. Oh, time to stage. Very quickly, let's do that. We're on our final stage. Alright, let's finish this. Still have it goes. Let's wrap back around to the periaps real fast. Okay, I really need to wrap this up super quickly. So let's hurry up and finish this orbit. Looks like we are going to have an icon counter, but it's after the periaps, so we're okay. 4, 3, 2, coming in hot. Zoom in on that vessel. How far? Okay, let's cut that in half very quickly. Come on, there we go. Reduce it down to about 20 seconds or so. Then let it reorient itself to retro, begin our burn. And we should see our apoapsis pop back up here shortly. Very good. Try to reduce that as close to 100,000 as possible. And then we will cut it off there. So we've been burning for about 15 seconds, so no more than 15 more seconds. We should be okay. We don't want to reduce that more than 100,000 if we can help it. But we want to make sure it's 100 by 100,000, as close as possible. There it goes, and let's cut it off. It's pretty close. Alright, we will save there. And I have to get going. We have a nice stable orbit that we will have to correct a little bit where it's at an angle, but we will do that in the next episode. But for now, we have our station. It is now in orbit. Let's rotate it. There we go. Relock onto retro. Looking good. Okay, so there's our station core, there's our fuel tank for the missions. Looking good. Let's save. Let's time warp so it stabilizes and then cut that off. Alright, now let's do a quick save and we will call this episode a quits. There we go. Thank you for watching. We now have our station in orbit. In the next episode we are going to build the vessel that we will be taking to Duna to land. And we may even go ahead and take it over to Ike and land, and then return from both. And try to knock both out in one episode, if we have enough fuel. But for now, thank you for watching. Hope this has been helpful. Can't wait to do these missions in the next episode. I'm not sure when I'll be able to do those, but keep an eye out for those, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.